When the flood came, everyone just stood there. Everyone, except for a 16-year-old girl who jumped barefoot into the raging river to save two boys no one wanted to save. What happened next changed an entire village forever. The summer of 1881 had brought more rain than anyone remembered. The red dirt paths through the village of Barlow had turned soft and sticky, and the air smelled like wet roots. People moved slower, careful not to slip, and chickens scratched the mud without much luck. Clara Bell stood at the edge of the riverbank, her bare feet sinking into the soggy ground. She was 16, thin as a fence post, with long brown hair braided down her back. Her dress was patched at the knees and damp at the hem. She looked out across the muddy water, which now moved faster than usual, swirling, rising, whispering. She didn't like that whisper. It wasn't the normal sound of moving water. It sounded like voices, low, far-off voices, murmuring things no one could quite understand. Her aunt, Mrs. Hargrove, had said it before, "The river talks before it takes." But no one listened. Not anymore. Behind Clara, the village buzzed with quiet work. Men mended fences that had fallen in the wind. Women hung dripping clothes on lines that sagged. And children, too many children, ran along the banks, chasing each other with sticks, yelling and laughing. Clara's eyes narrowed when she saw two little boys near the edge. She recognized them, Elias and Jonah, sons of the Harris family from the far end of the village. They were poor like most in Barlow, but polite boys, respectful and quiet. "Too close," Clara whispered, mostly to herself. From under the brim of her worn straw hat, she looked up at the clouds. Thick and low, heavy with more rain. The sun had not shown its face in 3 days. The river had always been a calm thing, lazy, warm, and brown like the land, but today it looked like something else. Restless, hungry. Old Man Mays, the village elder, had warned them all 3 times this week. If it rains again, the river will climb out of its bed and look for blood. Most people just laughed. "It's just the usual flood talk," someone had said. "Old bones and old fears," another added. But Clara didn't laugh. She believed in listening, especially when no one else did. A sudden gust of wind hit her, lifting the corner of her dress. It carried the sound of a splash, small but sharp. She looked back toward the boys. Jonah was now standing on a log, balancing, arms out wide. Elias clapped and cheered him on. Clara's stomach twisted. She stepped forward without thinking. "Elias." "Jonah," she called out. The boys didn't hear, or didn't listen. The river below them whispered louder. That night, the rain returned, harder than before. It pounded the tin roof of Aunt Hargrove's cabin like fists full of nails. The wind howled through the cracks in the wooden walls. Clara Bell lay wide awake on her thin mattress, staring at the ceiling, counting the seconds between thunder and lightning. 1, 2, 3. Boom. The old woman snored softly in the next room, wrapped in her quilt. But Clara couldn't sleep. Then came the sound she had feared all week, the groan of moving earth. She sat up fast. Something was wrong. Outside, a scream tore through the storm. Then another. Clara ran to the front door, barefoot, heart racing. She pushed it open, and cold rain slapped her face. The wind pulled at her nightdress like it wanted to carry her away. She could barely see past the dark, but voices echoed through the village, shouting, crying, calling names. Lanterns flickered in windows. Dogs barked. Chickens squawked in their coops. She stepped into the mud. A neighbor ran past with a rope in his hand. "The Harris place is gone," he yelled to no one in particular. Clara froze. The Harris place. Elias. Jonah. She didn't think. She ran. The path to the Harris farm was already covered in water, more river than road. Her feet splashed through puddles as high as her ankles. Lightning flashed. In that moment, she saw it, the outline of the Harris house half submerged, the porch tilted, walls groaning. A woman screamed from a hill. "My babies! My boys!" Clara saw Mrs. Harris on her knees, soaked to the bone, reaching toward the water like she could pull her children back by hand. A group of men stood nearby, holding torches and ropes, but none stepped into the flood. "No use," one said. "They're gone." Clara pushed past them. "What happened?" "They was out in the barn when the side gave in," someone answered. Water caught him and carried him off. Can't see nothing in this mess. They'll be long gone. Gone. Just like that. She looked at the rushing water. It had swallowed everything. The fields, the fences, even the old scarecrow now floated past, face down in the flood. Then, faintly, so faint it might have been imagination, Clara heard it. Help! A child's voice, swallowed by wind and rain. She turned toward the sound, eyes scanning the water. Nobody else moved. They're still out there, Clara shouted. The men stayed still. You'll drown too, one warned. But Clara Bell wasn't thinking about death. She was thinking about the muddy river, the whisper it made, and two boys who had played too close. She ran along the bank, following the voice, heart pounding. The river had taken something, but maybe it hadn't kept it. Not yet. Clara Bell kicked off her shoes without stopping. Her feet hit the cold mud, and she ran, down the bank, past the broken fence, straight toward the river's roar. The wind lashed at her face. Rain blinded her eyes. But ahead, in the shifting dark, she saw something move, a shape too small to be a log. It bobbed, then vanished, then bobbed again. Hold on, she shouted, though she couldn't be sure anyone heard her. She reached the edge and leapt without thinking. The river grabbed her. It was not water. It was force, a wild, living thing. The cold punched her chest and stole her breath. The current spun her sideways, dragged her under, threw her up again like a rag. She gasped, coughing mud. Her arms fought the pull. Her legs kicked, but the current pulled harder. Then a cry. Clara! It was Elias. She turned her head and saw him, barely, clinging to a floating piece of wood. His little brother, Jonah, lay limp across his lap. The boy wasn't moving. Jonah won't wake up. Elias shouted, voice cracking with panic. I'm coming, Clara yelled back. She forced her arms forward, one pull at a time. Her dress wrapped around her legs like weeds. Her body screamed from the cold, but she pushed through the black water, kicking, clawing, calling Elias's name again and again. She reached them just as Elias began to lose his grip. Jonah's head slipped sideways. No, Clara gasped, grabbing the smaller boy first. His body was heavy, soaked, and frighteningly still. She wrapped her arm under his and pulled him close. With her other hand, she reached out to Elias. Hold my shoulder, she said. Don't let go. I got you, Elias choked, his small hand gripping her tight. Now the river pulled harder. 3 bodies. No strength left. They were moving fast, past tree branches, barrels, a dead chicken, someone's chair. Then a snap. A large wooden gate, broken, floating, hit them hard. Clara's shoulder slammed into it, but she grabbed the slats. The gate rocked wildly, but it floated. She wrapped Jonah over it and used her last strength to drag herself half on. Elias climbed up beside her. They clung there, shaking, coughing, crying. Jonah was still not moving. Please, Clara whispered. Not like this. She pressed her hand to his chest. Nothing. Then a small cough. Jonah shivered and let out a weak breath. He's breathing, Elias said, voice breaking. Clara nodded, eyes full of rain and tears. The gate floated forward slowly now, caught in a calmer current. But the river still surrounded them, wide, muddy, endless. Clara held the boys close, whispering, We're not done yet. We're not done. The flood had tried to take them, but she had not let go. The broken gate floated slower now, caught in a bend where the current softened. But the water was still deep, still wide, and still dangerous. Clara's arms ached. Her legs trembled. Her soaked nightdress clung to her like chains. Jonah lay across the wood like a doll, unmoving. His little mouth hung open. His eyes were closed. No sound came from his chest. He's not breathing again, Clara whispered. I don't know what to do. Elias cried. He's my brother. Don't. Clara's mind raced. She tried to remember. Years ago, Aunt Hargrove had helped a neighbor boy who fell into a well. Clara had watched from the doorway, frozen, as her aunt knelt beside him and pressed both hands on his chest, again and again. Push like the heart forgot how to beat, Aunt Hargrove had said. Clara laid Jonah flat on the gate. His skin was pale. His lips looked blue. She placed her hands on his chest, gently, but firmly. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. She paused. Still nothing. She tried again, this time counting louder. Come back, Jonah. Come back. The gate rocked beneath them. Rain still fell, though lighter now. Thunder rolled somewhere far away. Clara pushed again. Elias held his brother's hand, whispering something only Jonah would understand. Then, on the 12th push, a cough. A small, wet sound. Jonah's eyes fluttered. Water poured from his mouth. He gasped, shallow and shaky, but he breathed. He's alive. Elias shouted, voice cracking with relief. Clara nodded, too stunned to speak. Her hands trembled. Her heart beat so fast she could barely think. Keep him warm, she said softly, pulling Jonah into her arms. We'll get to land soon. Elias wiped his face, still crying. Where do we go? Clara looked ahead. A few yards away, a giant tree had fallen sideways into the water, its thick trunk stretching across part of the river like a broken bridge. That tree, she said. If we can get to it, we'll be safe. Elias nodded and moved to the front of the gate, using a broken board as a paddle. Clara kicked with her legs, still holding Jonah close. Together, stroke by stroke, they moved the gate toward the tree. The water pushed back. The river wasn't finished. But Clara and Elias fought harder. Just before the current could carry them past, Elias reached out and grabbed a low branch. Clara grabbed too. The gate bumped the tree trunk and stopped. Elias scrambled up first, then reached down to help Clara pull Jonah. They sat there, 3 soaked children, shivering, breathing, alive. Jonah moaned softly and curled into Clara's lap. She stroked his wet hair and whispered, You came back, little one. The river rushed on beneath them, dark and endless. But up on the tree, a breath had returned, and a line between life and death had been crossed, not by luck but by love and sheer will. The sky began to lighten, slowly pushing the dark back toward the hills. A dull orange glow crept over the flooded fields as dawn arrived, heavy with silence. Clara Bell sat with her back against the fallen tree, arms wrapped around Jonah, whose breathing was slow but steady. Elias lay curled at her side, his head resting on her shoulder. All 3 were soaked, shivering, and covered in river mud. They had survived the night. Somehow, in the distance, a faint sound grew louder, hoofbeats and splashes, the creak of wagon wheels, and a voice calling through cupped hands. Anyone out there? Hello. Clara forced herself upright and waved her arm weakly. Here. We're here. A few seconds later, Elder Sam appeared at the bend in the river, standing in a half-submerged wagon. His lantern swung low, lighting up the tree where the children sat. Lord above, he breathed. Clara Bell. She nodded slowly. I've got him. Elder Sam shouted behind him. They're alive. Within minutes, others arrived. Ropes were thrown. Gentle hands reached. Clara refused to let go of Jonah until they were lifted together into the back of the wagon. Elias climbed in after them, teeth chattering. As the wagon rolled through the mud back toward the village, people gathered, silent, wide-eyed. No one spoke. No one had words. At Clara's home, Mrs. Hargrove waited on the porch, gripping her cane with both hands. Her face turned toward the sound of the wheels. Though blind, she knew. They're here, she said. The wagon stopped. Elder Sam lifted Clara out and carried Jonah gently in his arms. Elias followed, wrapped in a borrowed coat. Inside the small cabin, neighbors lit lamps and stoked the fire. Wet clothes were peeled off. Warm blankets were wrapped tight. Jonah was placed near the hearth, his small frame trembling. Mrs. Hargrove knelt beside him. Her hands, though worn by age, moved with surprising care. Still breathing, she whispered, Still with us. She turned her sightless face toward Clara and gently touched her cheek. You heard them, didn't you? She asked. Clara nodded, then remembered her aunt couldn't see. Yes, ma'am. I did. There was a long pause. The room held its breath. God used your ears, Mrs. Hargrove said softly, to hear what others would not. That is not small. Elias looked up from the blanket wrapped around him. She jumped in the river. For us. Nobody else would. More neighbors arrived, quiet, ashamed. Some had stood still the night before. Some had said they're gone. Now they stood in Clara's kitchen, holding warm food and dry clothes, unsure what to say. Elder Sam broke the silence. Let be known, This girl, this child, showed more courage than 10 grown men. The cabin was quiet again. Outside, the river still rushed, high and muddy. But inside, 3 children were alive, and 1 girl had done the impossible. Not with strength, with mud on her feet, and prayer in her heart. For a few days, the village of Barlow stood still. The rain had stopped. The river slowly pulled back into its banks, leaving behind mud, broken fences, and silence. And whispers. At the well, at the church, on porches where women shelled peas and men smoked pipes. Some said Clara Bell was brave, a hero. Others asked why she had risked her life for them. You mean the Harris boys? Someone would ask, pretending not to mean more. But everyone knew. They're not our kind, one old man muttered by the feed store. A few nodded. Others looked away. Clara heard the whispers. Not directly, but in the way people paused when she passed. The way the Reverend looked at her during Sunday prayers, part pride, part unease. Mrs. Hargrove knew too. She said nothing. She just sat by the fire, listening. On the 3rd day after the rescue, Elias came walking up the dirt path toward Clara's house, holding something wrapped in cloth. He was wearing clean clothes now. His lip was still swollen, but he walked straighter. Clara met him at the steps. "You didn't have to come," she said. "Yes, I did," he replied, quietly but sure. He held out the cloth bundle. Clara opened it slowly. Inside was a necklace, handmade, old, strung with tiny white and red beads. At the center was a carved wooden disc with a small bird etched into it. "It was my grandmother's," Elias said. "She wore it at church. She wore it to bury her son, my uncle. Daddy says she wore it through every hard year." Clara blinked. "It's beautiful. My family wants you to have it. Not as thanks. As family." Clara stared at him, unsure what to say. Behind her, Mrs. Hargrove called from inside. "Well, let the boy in or send him off. Standing in doorways leads to cold feet and colder hearts." They both laughed softly. Inside, the fire crackled. The room smelled of coffee and clean laundry. Elias sat across from Clara, twisting his hands in his lap. Clara held the necklace carefully. "It's heavy," she said. Elias nodded. "It carries a lot." She looked at him. "You sure?" "My daddy said, give it to the girl who saved your brother. Let her carry us like she did that night." "So yeah, I'm sure." Mrs. Hargrove cleared her throat. "This house has room for more family than blood gives. Always did." Later that night, Clara sat by the fire alone, the necklace still in her hand. Outside, the village slept. The river was quiet now, but the whispers still moved like smoke under doors. But inside Clara's heart, a quiet fire had started, one built not on praise or fear, but on something older, something true. At the edge of Barlow, just beyond the schoolhouse, stood an old pecan tree with thick limbs and low shade. Folks called it the meeting tree. Long ago, before things got tense, people used to gather there, picnics, prayers, planting plants. But not in years. Not since color started deciding who stood where. That changed one Sunday morning. Elder Sam stood on the church steps after service, holding his warm Bible. "We need to talk," he said loud enough for everyone to hear. "All of us. At the tree. This afternoon." Some people paused mid-step. Others kept walking like they hadn't heard. But word spread. By 4 o'clock, folks began to arrive. Black families stood near the fence at first, unsure. White families clumped by the well. A line of silence sat between them, old and heavy. Then Clara Bell stepped out of the crowd. She walked straight to the tree and stood beside Elder Sam. Her dress was clean. Her hair was pulled back in a tight braid. Around her neck, she wore the red and white bead necklace Elias had given her. People quieted. Elder Sam raised his hand. "Y'all know why we're here." No one answered. He looked at Clara. "Go ahead, child." She swallowed. Her mouth felt dry. "I didn't come here to give a speech," she said, voice small but clear. "I'm not smart with words." Someone shifted in the crowd. Clara looked up, met their eyes. "I jumped in that river because I heard voices calling. I didn't know if they were white or black. I just heard fear." A wind moved through the branches. "I held a dying boy in my arms," she continued. "I pushed his chest until he breathed again. And when he did, I cried. Not because he was Elias's brother. Not because he was a Harris boy." She paused. but because he was a child. A life, like any of us. Her hands shook, but she didn't step back. We all bleed, Clara said. We all float in the same water. Silence fell. Elias's father took off his hat. Mrs. Hargrove wiped her blind eyes. Then someone clapped. Just once. Then again. Then more. And the line between people, between white and black, broke just a little. Families walked closer. A mother offered cornbread from her basket. A father shared cold lemonade. Children played in the grass, laughing, not knowing this day was different. Elder Sam smiled. About time, he said. Clara stood beneath the pecan tree, unsure if she had done something big or small. But when Elias slipped beside her and said, "Thank you," she smiled back. Sometimes change didn't come with fire. Sometimes it came like water, slow, steady, and impossible to stop. 2 weeks after the flood, the sun came back strong. The ground dried, the chickens scratched again, and the river settled into a quiet brown ribbon. But the damage remained. Houses leaned, barns had caved in, fences were gone, and fields were soaked too deep to plant. Rebuilding began, but only on one side of town. White families got lumber from the county. A wagon came with food and blankets for them. The black families waited and waited. Clara Bell noticed. She always noticed. One morning, she sat at the small kitchen table with a pencil, an ink bottle, and her best paper. Mrs. Hargrove sat across from her, shelling peas with worn fingers. "What are you scribbling now?" her aunt asked. "I'm writing a letter," Clara said, "to the county office in Jackson." Mrs. Hargrove chuckled. "You planning to ask for a new porch?" Clara looked up. "No, ma'am. I'm asking for fairness." That made her aunt pause. "To them. To us," Clara corrected. "All of us. The whole town." She wrote late into the night. Her words were plain but strong. "We are a small village, but we have big hearts." The flood did not choose between white homes and black homes. It took from everyone. So why does help only come to some? That is not right. That is not justice. We ask for materials, tools, and food, enough for every family, because every family matters. She signed it simply. Clara Bell Hargrove, age 16, of Barlow. Then she folded it neat and tied it with string. The next day, she brought it to Elder Sam. He read it twice, then said, "We'll need more names." By sunset, the letter had passed through 20 hands. Men signed with careful pride. Women added their names in loops and curls. Some, who could not write, left a mark and said, "Add me in spirit." Even Elias's father signed. So did the feed store owner. And the school teacher. By week's end, Clara stood by the post wagon with a sealed envelope and 50 names. The driver eyed it, surprised. "What's this from Barlow?" "A request," she said, "for fairness." He tipped his hat. Word spread fast. That girl wrote a letter. To the state. Bold, ain't she? Clara didn't listen to the noise. She went back to work, helping nail roof boards, serving soup at the church hall, sitting beside Mrs. Harris while Jonah napped on her lap. The wind shifted that week, not just in weather, but in how folks looked at her. She wasn't just the girl who jumped in the river. She was the girl who spoke out. And Barlow, a town split by silence, felt something new blowing in. It was a warm Saturday when the village gathered under the pecan tree again. A table had been set up with cornbread, beans, sweet tea, and pies brought by both white and black families. Children ran barefoot in the grass. The river, just visible beyond the tree line, flowed quietly, no longer angry. No one said it was a celebration, but it felt like one. Elder Sam stood up first. "We come here today," he said, "not just to eat, but to remember, to see each other, and maybe to begin again." Heads nodded. Then Elias's father stepped forward, holding something wrapped in cloth. He cleared his throat. "Some of you know what this is," he said, unwrapping a small wooden plaque. On it, carved by hand, was a bird, a heart, and a pair of ears. "This is a naming gift," he continued. "Not by blood, but by deed." He turned to Clara, who stood at the edge of the crowd, her hands clasped tight. "My family has talked long about what happened that night," he said. "How you didn't look at color. You looked at fear. You heard voices others ignored. You saved our boys." He took a step closer and held out the plaque. "We'd like to give you a name. one that comes from more than skin or kin. He looked into her eyes. Heart that listens. A hush fell across the gathering. Clara didn't move at first. Then she stepped forward, her face flushed. She took the plaque with both hands. I don't know what to say, she whispered. You already said it, Elias said softly. With your heart. Mrs. Hargrove, sitting nearby with her cane resting across her lap, smiled. She earned it, the old woman said. Every letter of it. The name caught on quicker than anyone expected. Children began to call her that with playful respect. Neighbors repeated it at the store. Even the schoolteacher used it once, without thinking. That week, the school hosted its first joint meeting. Black and white parents sitting on the same benches, talking about books, supplies, and the future. The next week, a shared well was dug between two homes that had never spoken before. And when supplies finally came from Jackson, thanks to Clara's letter, no one dared divide them unfairly. Something was shifting, not all at once, but deeply. People still whispered, still hesitated. But the lines once drawn in silence were now softer, blurrier. Children played together in the road. Women traded pies and herbs. Men nodded across fences. And in the middle of it all was Clara Bell, no longer just a girl, no longer just the one who jumped. Now she was heart that listens, not by blood, but by choice. Many years had passed since the flood. The village of Barlow had changed, not loudly, not quickly, but deeply. The roads were smoother now. New houses stood where old ones had crumbled. The church had fresh paint, and the schoolhouse had longer benches. But the river still flowed, wide and brown, just as it always had. And near its bend, where the tree once fell, a stone now stood. It wasn't fancy, just a flat, round boulder set upright in the soil, with words carved into it by hand. She heard. She jumped. She changed us. Every spring, children gathered around it. Some came barefoot, carrying lunch pails and questions. Others brought wildflowers, placing them at the base of the stone without knowing why, only that it mattered. In front of them stood a woman in a faded blue dress, her hair streaked with silver, her back straight as a fence post. Clara Bell. To most of them, she was Miss Clara, the schoolteacher. To some, heart that listens. To a few, just a lady who smiled more than she scolded. She looked at the faces in front of her, brown, white, freckled, curly-haired, sunburnt, all of them bright with curiosity. Do you know why this stone is here? She asked. One small girl raised her hand. Because someone did something brave. Clara smiled. Yes. Someone heard a cry and didn't wait for permission to act. Was it you? Asked a boy, tilting his head. Clara paused. I was just someone who listened when others didn't. That's all. She stepped closer to the stone and placed her hand gently on the top. This stone doesn't just belong to me, she said. It belongs to anyone who chooses courage over comfort, action over silence, love over fear. The children sat quiet. Even the wind seemed to hold its breath. Elias's grandson, tall, bright-eyed, and proud, stood beside his friend, a girl with long blonde braids and muddy knees. They held hands without thinking. No one pulled them apart. In the distance, the church bell rang once. Tom head back. Clara watched the children walk away, skipping, racing, carrying stories they didn't yet understand. She stayed behind, looking at the stone. The words had faded a little, worn by rain and time, but their meaning had only grown. That night, at home, Clara sat by her window with a cup of warm tea. The bead necklace still hung beside her bed, and the letter she wrote all those years ago stayed folded in the back of her Bible. Mrs. Hargrove had passed long ago, but her words lived on. God, use your ears. Outside, the river whispered, and inside, Clara smiled. Because sometimes the greatest change doesn't come from speeches or battles. Sometimes it begins with one girl, a muddy river, and the choice to jump. Did this story move you? Have you ever witnessed someone act with quiet courage? Tell us your story in the comments below. And if Clara's voice touched your heart, leave us a like and subscribe for more stories that remind us kindness still matters.